Welcome back to another episode of Critical Solutions. I am Josh.
And I'm Mason.
And today we have another very special guest. This is someone I've known for quite a long time. Went to high school with him. Now he's like important and does cool things. It's kind of weird to think about. But after leaving Beech Grove High School, he went on to get his undergraduate degree in movement and sports science at Purdue University. After that, he went on to complete his Juris Doctorate at Indiana University, Robert H. McKinney School of Law. He now is a licensed attorney at Gilbert Legal Services, and today we have none other than the Gavin O'Gara.
Oh, wow. That's got to be the best intro I've ever received, Josh. And to be clear, I'm much more proud of the Purdue colors than I am the IU.
I know, we had to tease you on that one.
That's actually a requirement for the podcast. You can't be full IU fan.
Hey, if you guys get Purdue to create a law school, I'll go to it.
Fair enough.
That could be one of the problems we solve on the show. You know, man, you just brought a good one up.
You going to get old man Mitch on here too?
We could. Now he has more free time.
Yeah, that would be a great idea.
He's unemployed now, right?
Yeah, you're right. I wasn't thinking, but I'm sure he's still got some sway.
Obviously, we hang out a little bit outside of the fun podcast we're doing, but what's something this week that's been a bit annoying to you that you want to get off your chest?
So, and hopefully I'm not divulging too much of the behind the scenes here, but, actually, you sent me some questions beforehand, right? And I looked over them, and one of them got me thinking, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a bit too much, but I had a court hearing somewhat recently, and this is probably the second time this has happened to me, but there was a judge that we were trying to get a guardianship for someone, right? Which this is a pretty interesting case, really. But anyway, this judge was denying the guardianship based on the fact that we didn't have this physician's report. This is all really nuts and bolts, pretty boring stuff, right? But I submitted 2 physician's reports. However, I couldn't get the judge to acknowledge that I'd submitted 2 physician's reports, right? So we're going round and round, and ultimately I only got a temporary guardianship for my client because they refused to acknowledge something that I clearly filed. But, it's a judge. They got the power of God, so I don't really know what you're supposed to do about it. At the end of the day, you can only push so much, and the judge always is right. So, but anyway, that it's just little things like that. Sometimes you could do everything right, and you still get the raw end of the deal.
Yeah,
man.
Especially all
What
that
the
prep work
fuck?
you probably did.
Yeah, I'd be pissed.
Did you think about bribing the judge?
Yeah,
Well, I might have to think about that in the future, huh? But, no, it's just sometimes we all. I mean, a good saying I like: eat shit, cash checks, right? We all got to do a little bit of that, but the judge is always right. But it's just one of those, you just anyway. Sometimes people get the raw end of the deal, but this is a pretty sad story, and honestly, I probably can't divulge too many details where somebody could ascertain who this person was, but anyway, it's just those types of little things that stick with you sometimes. And this judge, I've got a really good repertoire with her. She's been a good judge in the past, but anyway, there's actually in Marion County, there's a new kind of a changing of the guard as of this year. There's a new probate judge who's replacing the judge that has been the judge for probably the past decade. And so I'm sure there's a lot of changes going on in that court. And this is just a magistrate, which for those at home, it's kind of a lesser judge. She works under the bigger judge, right? So
Assistant
clear
regional manager.
right. She is the Dwight Schrute to the head probate judge. So anyway, just one of those. Sometimes you just got to get it done any way you can, or try to get as close to getting it done. This was one of those cases.
Yeah, it's annoying because it's like it's one of those things that you can't quite comprehend, like how she just doesn't see, but like you have no control over it, and you're not sure exactly where the problem is stemming from. It just is a problem.
Sure. And I mean, again, it's hard. maybe it's not the best anecdote, because this is one where it's hard for me to dance around, not giving the details, but fully explaining it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
However, it's, I filed the initial documents and then filed the physician's reports later on, and it's like they don't want to look past face value sometimes. It's like, and I'm sure they got a big docket, and it's hard to do. And I know this judge, this woman, I've had many hearings with her over years, but I don't know, she was having a bad day, didn't have her coffee in that morning or what, but here we are, and weren't able to get quite what we were looking for. But anyway, just something that
Maybe
happens sometimes.
since you're not like direct colleagues, you can't really like push, like he said, since it's a judge and all, we could come up with a system where there's like social pressure for them to be better, like a rate my professor, like rate my judge. You suck today. You overlook some important documents. Something along those lines that we could get going, and you kind of spearhead the thing, Gavin. You can be like the leading reviewer of the judges you have to deal with.
Or make it like a Twitter thing, right? Like how you always, when a ref makes a bad call, costs someone the game, you see about it all over Twitter, Just have that, but for the legal system. Just be like, this judge, terrible performance today. Absolute buffoonery.
I agree, but the problem is we got this whole freaking confidentiality thing, right? So how do I bitch about the judge in a particular instance without telling who my client is,
What's the worst that happens? You go to jail?
Well, you get debarred, Josh, and what am I? I'm going to be working
like 7 years.
Yeah, I'm going to be working at Raising Cane's so that I can mix up the high C and the water lines.
So glad you pulled that up. You just talking about how they're putting another one in, so I'm gonna go test it. But like, how's the water? Is it pink again?
At the end of the day, though, I think it's just, law's one of those weird areas where sometimes perfection is expected, but there's human error everywhere.
Yeah.
So, I know podcast is all about bitching a little bit and coming up with some solutions, but I don't know if there's a direct solution for this one. I mean, I think more judges probably helps, but more judges means more taxes, and I don't know that everybody's going to be on board with that.
Of course.
Yeah.
I love giving away our paychecks.
No, it's hard to fuck with a system that's kind of been, chilling there for a minute. It's been set in stone for quite some time, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so hard to undo.
Yeah.
And gosh, the legislatures anywhere, state, local, or otherwise, it seem to be constantly gridlocked. It's a tough problem. Way above my pay grade, I know that.
Is there something that you would change about like the court proceedings you have to do? Like, is there something you feel like that slows it down too much, or something along those lines you wish you have a better solution you think you could implement?
I don't know how you fix the particular problem I had with this judge without the judges having more time. As far as the structure of the thing, the whole nature of a guardianship proceeding is you're trying to take someone else's rights and vest them in another person, right? So if someone's over the age of 18, you're asking a judge to take away their rights, invest them in another person, similar to a parent-child relationship. Or if you have a child that either has an asset or has lost a parent or something, you're trying to vest the rights that would have been in another parent in another person. So I think that kind of process, it is worthy of a lot of complications and a lot of hoops. I mean, you don't want to take away someone's rights willy-nilly. In this particular guardianship, it was an adult person who has had a pretty rough life, and one of his family members was trying to get guardianship over him. He's severely mentally incapacitated, and this lady just wanted to be able to take care of her family member. And but at the same time, it's easy to look at someone or to look at a doctor's note and say, gosh, that person can't take care of themselves. But when you really think about the gray area there, right, it's hard to draw a fine line. I mean, not to get overly legal or constitutional, I guess, but we all are entitled to notice and an opportunity to be heard if our rights are going to be taken away. So you have to give the people at least that. There's a lot of legal processes nowadays. If it's not adversarial and there's not two sides to it, like a divorce or someone suing someone, you can do it completely outside the court system. But this particular instance of guardianship, I think it's worthy of needing a pretty official judicial process. It's just, I think they just need more time to be able to see this stuff. I think maybe I was overly thorough, if anything, on this one. Not to
No, that was good.
But we just really had to press her to try to get some sort of resolution of what was going on. And anyway, but that's just something that's kind of been on my mind, at least professionally, something that's been in my crawl, so to speak. But
So like more.
it could have been worse.
To help with the volume of cases, essentially, like lessen the workload per judge.
Yeah, I don't really know how else, because I know this judge is a good judge, and I know they're going through a lot of changes right now in that particular county. But anyway,
I feel like that's similar to like when you have teachers with way too many student ratio, like the way high student ratio, but they're a good teacher, but when they're just overwhelmed, it's hard for you to perform adequately.
Absolutely. And yeah, I just, gosh, especially in certain localities, budgets are already so tight. Where do you come up with that stuff? I don't know. I mean, do you cut library funding and have more judges? I mean, just the trade-offs you have to decide are so difficult. There's drawbacks to everything. Always some sort of compromise. Right. Right. Defunding. Yeah, we're going to take it from the police and give it to the judges. That seems efficient.
That would be great.
They're in the same realm. It's just moving shit around.
Right. Well, we're all keeping it on kind of the same side of the coin, right? We're just kind of moving it around a little bit.
Or we just combine it all and they're just Judge Dreads walking around, the police and executioner all in one. Have you seen that?
So, yes, Judge Dredd. So I guess something that's not professional though, per se. I started off with that kind of based on the questions you had, but something I've been thinking about. So I recently, for the first time, I've been in a fantasy football league with some college roommates of mine from the great University of Purdue, right?
Sure.
And that's one of the ways that we stay close moving forward. But I won our fantasy football league for like the first time in 10 years that we've been doing it.
Hey, congratulations.
Right? And amazingly, with Joe Burrow as my quarterback.
Ooh.
Right? So, but this brings me to, something else I've been thinking about. So the whole Damar Hamlin thing.
Yeah.
I would say I personally totally agree with how the NFL handled it, canceling the game in the moment or suspending it, however you want to look at it. It appears that Damar received as good of medical care on the spot as one could hope under those circumstances.
Oh, yeah.
But it kind of irks me a little. It's, at least last time I saw, unless there's been some real recent news, I don't think they're going to play that game out. Correct?
I think they decided it over a coin flip or something like that.
I mean, that I don't understand. I guess I understand how you don't play that game in the moment. You delay it. There's bigger things to handle. But man, these dudes make millions of dollars. They sign a contract. They sign up for this. It's a league worth billions and billions. And there's so much that rides on these games. And, there are certain things that can't be controlled. But I guess I don't have a whole lot of sympathy if they had to play two games, not necessarily on the same day, but in the same week leading up to the playoffs. I mean, I know that's tough, but yeah, I think it's what you get paid for personally. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that, but that's kind of stuff that I've been thinking about too. And it's not purely based on fantasy. Obviously, somehow I still managed to squeak it out even without Joe Burrow. But nonetheless, sometimes I just think we have too much sympathy in a lot of situations nowadays. You know what I mean?
The wrong areas, I think.
Yeah.
That's so. I'm so glad you brought this up because I was talking about this with my brother, and you gotta be. I don't want to say certain things because no matter how I say it, it'll come off bad. But
Yeah, it's hard to bring up without sounding bad. I wondered
I
about that
know.
myself.
There's a few things you said I would love to get on to, but one of them, I won't go too deep into other parts, but when you brought up the money thing, also, how many like advertising dollars did they lose off that game because they couldn't air the commercials, or like how does that play out? Do they have to pay back any of that money that they had originally got? It's kind of like the World Cup when they said they could have beer, then right before they said no, and all that Budweiser was already there.
Right.
I didn't actually
And
know
yeah.
that Budweiser was there, and they were just like, "Nah, don't bring that in."
Yeah. So they
That's
said
insane.
they said I think they were giving all of it to whoever won or something like that. I don't know if they ended up doing it.
Oh, I did hear
Really?
something about that.
Can you imagine how much
That's
that was?
interesting.
Good Lord.
I mean, unless Qatar won, they could have pulled it out, and then what would they have done with it?
They're already one of the richest countries in the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But going back to
Not necessarily the best government, but
the Hamlin thing, I get what you're saying with like there's too much sympathy. I think you could also make the case that there's not enough. It's just directed in the worst spots. Like when you hear about some actor who had some little thing go wrong with them, and everybody's like, "Oh my God!" Like one for me is the Prince Harry shit. I could give a fuck about that guy. Oh, he had to leave the royal family. I'm so sorry that now you're like a rich person in America and you're not a royal person in your country. Who fucking cares? Like, there's people struggling that are trying to help others and like that die doing their jobs that were like doctors or something more constructive to society, and people don't care because it's part of like the system. It's expected.
Well, yeah, but Josh, you got to remember, rich people are more important than us.
You're not wrong.
We're supposed to care more.
Unfortunately,
it's true. And in my experience, the richest people are the biggest dicks.
what's do you have you, I imagine you probably had to work with a lot doing the state stuff. Do you have one where somebody's like a raging asshole for no reason?
I think that, look, we're all human beings. We all have to worry about something, right? Like, again, maybe I'm being too much of a drag, I feel like, but like there's kids starving in Africa right now, right? And we're all sitting here bitching about the NFL. Like there's degrees to this shit. So I think the more you have, the tinier the things you nitpick on.
It's a good point. That's very true. It's kind of like the more money you have, you spend more. So it's like, how do you have money problems? You make $1 million a year. Well, you spend $1.5 million a year.
Right. But you brought up a point, Josh, that I think I've kind of got a good counter to. Were either of you guys watching the game when the Damar Hamlin thing happened?
I was, yeah.
So, unfortunately, I'm a Colts fan. That's been pretty rough this year. But my wife is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I mean, diehard. It's one of the things I love about her. We love watching footballs or Sundays are football days, right? It's like she loves football, maybe even more than I do. But so she likes watching the Bengals because that's a big rival of the Steelers, right? So we were just watching the game on that Monday night. But you were talking about the advertising dollars that were lost. Really, if you were watching that game, watching the commentators was super awkward for like an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
But ESPN just drug it on and drug it on. And I was thinking to myself, because they would have the commentators talk really awkwardly, like sometimes tearing up for it's an hour or more, however long it drug on. And you could tell they didn't want to be there. Like Booger McFarland, I think, clearly did not want to be there at the time. I think he even said as much. He was inferring, like, why are we still up here talking about it? But they would talk in 5-minute increments, and then they'd go on 5-minute ad breaks. And this went on for like an hour. You got these cheery ads and these pharmaceutical ads, these beer ads. And I'm thinking, how much are advertisers, how much are they making in advertising dollars right now? Because this guy almost died on the field. Like,
That's a good point.
In the grand scheme of things, maybe not playing that game out lost some advertising dollars. But I just remember thinking in the moment, it seemed super slimy to me that they drug it out for like an hour and a half, basically recycling the same bullshit and running advertisements.
Gotta feed the mouse, man.
It's weird, and I don't know, because I was kind of watching, and then when that happened, as you said, like it drug on for so long that I just turned it off after a while. but I'm not sure. Like I don't remember. Do you remember how long it took them before they canceled the game? Said we're not going to play anymore.
I think it was in the neighborhood of an hour to an hour and a half, something at least. It might have been more than that. It was a long time.
Yeah, so I guess my thoughts are like they, you know, in their minds, the game could restart at any moment, and they just have to sit there talking about nothing. And obviously, they were talking about DeMar Hamlin's injury and everything like that. But when nothing's going on in the field, that's just 2 hours of just what are we doing? And you're right, it was super, super awkward. But I don't know. I don't know why it took them that long to cancel it. Really,
Like they probably had to weigh all the money on the line doing something.
Yeah, that's
yeah. They probably had to call Vegas and clear it with them, and they had to call Budweiser and not screw them. No, but it was very awkward to watch, and like I get it. I just think it went on way past the point where they should have moved on to like Fan Pelt or the next programming. It you could tell the commentators didn't want to be there, and they could not talk about the game. It would have been disrespectful, and it's probably a good thing, at least in my opinion, that they didn't. But so then they're trapped here without anything to talk about how much sympathy they had for DeMar Hamlin, but they just basically said that 1,000 times. Like, I don't know.
It's the elephant in the room too, right? It's like, okay, well, are we going to play this game? Everybody's thinking about it, but they can't say anything because A, they don't know, and B, that's like obviously not the most important thing at the moment,
Right. In this particular moment, everybody's thinking maybe we all together, everybody collectively that was watching this game might have just saw someone die.
Yeah.
Like that was the reality in the moment. So, everybody was upset about it. I know even my wife and I think everybody had sympathy, but these media giants, the wheels don't stop turning for anyone at the end of the day. But I just think that was such a weird moment in time. Like, I don't know. I think the most respectful thing to do would have been to shut it down and move on to something else, at least at a certain point. They just drug it on so long.
Or something.
Yeah.
Something along those lines that it can be a quick fill entertainment where you can kind of regroup, because the broadcast had to regroup,
I wonder if there was another game going on, if they would have switched to it instead. I can imagine they would, but
they couldn't have done.
Yeah.
I would like to think so.
That made me think, though, I don't know if this exactly pertains to that situation, but a big problem I have, too, since studying journalism, things like that, is the 24-hour news cycle. You make stories out of nothing. And so it gets people to just fluff up pieces that didn't need it. Right? Make stories out of things that should not have even been a story. Like how one single tweet can be a whole hour segment. Like, come on, because it's a rumor, some bullshit like that. So it almost feels like they were feeling the need because they had to, like you said, for an hour straight, like we got to do something because there's like a need, even though there's not really a need for it. Like we could have done without sports news for that hour until it came back or something. I don't know. Yeah. That is news what happens. I'm kind of being the opposite of what really journalists would have done in that situation, but I don't know. I feel like it perpetuates the issue.
And they would never have done this, but you've got a point with like they could literally just throw up a black screen up there until they figure everything out and it's time for the next program. It really wouldn't matter to anyone at all. It's essentially the same. We're watching nothing happen. They just would never do that because why would they? The show must go on kind of thing.
Well, and the feeling in the moment, I think, was everybody, broadcasters included, were on pins and needles waiting for just some sort of information about how the situation would be resolved, right? Definitely. And not really about the game, but the man, right? Just wanting to know about his condition, which obviously it appears that he's making a great recovery, and that's awesome. But it took a long time to figure all that out. I hope that this maybe sets a precedent where something like that is handled differently, which, I brought this up as a counter to talking about the losing of advertising dollars and how there was a lot of advertising that went on through that moment. But my personal feeling was that the advertising in that moment was the relief from the awkwardness that you were seeing on the broadcast, right? Like I knew Yeah, I don't. It's just very, very bizarre. But and not to, I know you guys got other things you want to talk about, but just to play off this, because I actually genuinely want your guys' opinion about another element of this. So I mentioned the fantasy football thing. You remember Nick Roberts, Josh?
Oh,
He
yeah.
was in my grade. We went to high school. He actually lives in Seattle now, but I'm still pretty close with him. He's in the fantasy league I won. But he was also in another fantasy league where he was in his fantasy championship with a guy who had against a guy who was starting Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. And they were based on their projections in the app. If they all scored their projections, this guy still would have lost by 5. But Nick was up by 70, and this guy had those 3 still to play, more or less.
Yeah.
So I guess, what do you guys think? I mean, I know how it was resolved, and I can divulge the deets, I suppose. But what do you guys think should have happened in that situation?
Oh, that's tough.
It really is tough. And I do have a question for you about that. You might not know because you said it was in a league that you're not in, right?
Correct. But I talked a lot to my buddy about it, so I know a little bit about it. But
So my fantasy league did in the playoffs. It's 2-week matchups, so your score from 2 weeks is combined. Is that the way they did it in their league?
no, it's just single week.
Okay, so in my league it actually didn't matter because the people who had Joe Burrow and Josh Allen were playing against each other, so we just called it even. Okay, they both just got like 5 points. It is what it is.
It worked out.
But if it were going to be a problem, I was thinking about it, and it would have been, I think, a good solution in our league to just disregard that week and just base it off of whatever 1 week it was that everybody actually played their players, But it sounds like that's not possible in that league.
I've done this once, and this is going to be frowned upon when people hear this. I kind of colluded with someone one time in fantasy where it was a family member, and we had other people who weren't family members in the league. It was a 10-person league, and we got to the championship. He and I did, and I was like, I'm very loss averse. Like, I don't risk very much. I'm more just like to lose as little as possible. So I was like, hey, man, do you just want to split the pot regardless of who wins? And he was like, sure. I ended up winning. So then I'm like, you know that.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah,
you're
you
one of
deserve that.
those.
What a
You
bitch.
slime ball.
This was also like 10 years ago, I guess, if that makes that any better. I've grown as a person since then, guys. Okay.
You coward.
So I was going to say they could just split the pot.
That's in my other fantasy league this year. I'm not gonna lie, I was joking, but I sort of jokingly asked my dad the same thing. I'm in a league with my dad and some of his buddies, and my dad and I played each other in the playoffs. But he was the number 1 seed. He was having a great year. I barely made the playoffs. Was the 5th seed, and we played each other. I was like, hey, if you make it to the ship, you just want to split the pot. And he was like, no, I've never won this league. I'm keeping this shit. So he actually went on to the championship and lost. So it didn't really matter. But
you guys are so slimy.
you got to cut your losses, Mason.
Oh, no. I'm playing fantasy. I'm in it for the win. Fuck all this split pot.
He's a
second
purist,
place
Gavin.
nonsense. I mean,
Well-
play to win or don't play at all.
He hates Indiana barbecue, all these things. He's a purist.
Well, he might have a point there. But I do like big tenderloins. I was like, what is Josh talking about?
What? What do you mean?
I love a big tenderloin. Give me a tenderloin this big. For the viewers at home, I'm making the sign for like an 18-inch pizza. You want to give me a tenderloin that's this wide? I'll eat it.
If they give you a bun as big as your head, I'm down. It's when they give you a little yarmulke bun that doesn't do fucking anything. I want to use it to hold the goddamn sandwich. Give me a big
You did
bun.
paint a good image. That's a really good image you painted there. I did enjoy that.
That's what it feels like when you're trying to grab that one tiny bit of burger.
It's like a little top hat on there. It's so annoying. But
Are you a sauce guy?
What do you mean?
Oh.
Like,
What would you put on your tenderloin? As far as like, do you like mayo, mustard, ketchup, something else?
lettuce, tomato, mayo. That's usually it. Sometimes mustard.
So would you? So I'm a mustard guy, but what I would do is I'd peel off all the outside parts of the bun, and then I'd eat the rest of it like chicken tenders or something in mustard.
Now that's.
But I'm just saying
that problem.
That's what I would do.
That's so smart. Because I went to a place, or I guess we might all know it, Waltz, up at near Purdue. You know what I'm talking about? You guys ever been there?
Never been there, no.
It's like
I don't
kind
even
of
recognize the name.
I don't
of
know
town. It's more like a nicer place.
Was it just some guy's house?
He cooks out of like a cauldron in his backyard. Some good beef stew. It's good shit. But they made chicken fingers basically, but it was pork like that. I've never had them anywhere except for there, and they're fucking amazing. So now you're saying that. Now I like want to go somewhere. I'm like, how big's your tenderloin? Can you cut it up, or do I need to do it myself? And they're like, what is this? We're gonna start selling this. And
I'd like a tenderloin stripped, please, and mustard on the side.
Real quick, that just made me think. Did you guys know, like, when you get pizza, do you ever dip the breadsticks in cheese or anything like that? Is that like normal for you guys? Okay,
Well,
you know,
not
like
most of the time, but I have, and I do.
that's a very regional thing.
What region?
Really?
Yeah. So I was watching a YouTube thing where they test foods, whatever. They're in California. They're from like Texas. They've been around anyway. People voted on dipping sauces, and that was one, and they were like bewildered by it. Like, this is odd. You dip it in cheese? I'm like, what the fuck? I did this since I was like a kid. I don't understand.
Are you saying the cheese sauce is the regional part, or dipping
Yeah.
crust in the cheese?
No, cheese sauce. Like, that's not like having that with
What?
pizza. Yeah. And then my friend
Like-
just moved to Houston, and he asked for that at pizza place, and the guy was like, you want to bring your bowl of shredded cheese? And he started laughing. Like, no, like sauce. He's like, I could melt
What?
the shredded cheese, and he's like, never mind, man. Yeah,
I would have been like, yeah, do that.
that blows my mind. I had no
Shredded
idea that was a thing.
Yeah,
Neither,
that's
this is
insane.
news to me.
So that I always want to. I'm very fascinated by like regional food stuff. So I wish there was a way. Like always when I was a kid, I wish you could order food, or maybe even now, not even a kid. You order food, but I just want like fries from this place, a burger from this place, and like a shake from this other place. But like one person delivers all of it. So we need to have like a supermarket that has just regional foods divided by like states.
That would be interesting. I wonder, where were you when, or was it you, or where did they not have the cheese sauce?
Houston, Texas,
Houston?
somewhere.
What?
They also have like no pizza places down there though. It's very strange.
Really?
They don't do-
What?
They have.
That's
some,
just
like,
un-American.
dude, you'll drive, and he said that he's like, there's like no real pizza around here. And I asked people when I moved, and they were just like, like they don't really do a lot of pizza. And I was like, bullshit, everyone does pizza. I looked around, and there was like not a ton of that. Like, you didn't see all these mom and pop pizza places like we have around here.
That's so odd.
Yeah, that's a problem they need to solve. More pizza.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if it's like, when it's really hot and you eat really heavy food, it sucks. Like you feel terrible. I don't know if like because it's hot as fuck down there a lot of times, or like.
I mean, maybe, but like, I'm never too hot to eat a pizza, like.
I agree.
Yeah, Mason's got a point there. I mean, I am with you, Josh. Like, I wouldn't want to, I could be a super sweaty guy when I'm in hot weather or I'm working out or something. It's like, I wouldn't want to eat, a Big Mac and then go on a mile walk in 100 degrees, 100% humidity. But for the most part, I'm always down for a pizza.
Yeah.
So, I want to pivot back to the fantasy a little bit because I'm curious. I have a question for you. So I know you had like a winner's pot or whatever. Did you guys do a punishment for the loser?
No, but I do like that idea. No, we do $50 buy-in, 10 people. Winner gets 300. The second place gets 150, and third gets their money back 50.
Nice.
It's good payout.
Yeah, I saw my friend was telling me about a punishment the other day where you go to Wendy's and you get a 4 for 4, and you have to chug a Sprite, run a lap, eat the burger, run a lap, eat the nuggets, run a lap, eat the fries, run a lap, and all the laps are like quarter mile, like around like a track, I guess, And you have to do all that in 13 minutes.
I love that there's a time limit.
And 13, like how random. Because I was doing the math with my friend who told me this the other day, and I was like, yeah, I could probably, do the Sprite in like a few minutes or whatever. And it was like, I'm confident I could do it in like 11 and a half, 12 minutes, which is like so close to that limit. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, that's not really easy.
no, I wouldn't say so.
I don't know.
I would definitely be feeling like ass by the end of it, but I feel like I could do it, and I kind of want to go to Wendy's and just.
Now I want to see this. You just better document it. Is all I have to say.
I kind of want to try it. Like I know it's not going to feel good, but I need to know if I can do it.
I will say I'm not super athletic by any means, but probably my preferred way of working out is just going on a run here and there. And I usually only go for like 3 miles, something like that. And it's not like an everyday thing for me. But like in high school, probably the fastest mile I ever ran when I was actually in shape and we were playing basketball, Josh, was I think I ran like a 6.5 minute mile once, right? But nowadays, I think when I'm just casually running or jogging, I mean, I probably like outside, not on a track, average like 9.5, 10-minute mile most of the time. But I think if I really pushed it, I don't think I could. Yeah, exactly. But I guess my point is, I think if I really pushed it, running a mile, I honestly don't think I could get much faster at this point. And so, like, when you break that down and you're thinking about eating all that food and also the exertion it takes to, like, really push it, like, because by that math, if I'm just running like a casual mile or casual laps, that really only gives you 3 minutes to scarf all that stuff down.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
That
Yeah,
spread, I think, is not going to be easy. It's going to be a couple for sure.
You have to do some Joey Chestnut, fucking force it down your throat to get that out. I don't eat fast, so that was immediately. I'm glad you said that. I immediately was gonna be like, I don't know if I could eat all that in 13 minutes.
Oh, you don't think? It's only like a junior bacon cheeseburger and a small fry.
Maybe.
Because they
Maybe.
changed it. They were greasy and they made it a $5 biggie bag now. Have you guys seen that? It's like not a 4 for $4 anymore.
No, I didn't realize that.
Of course.
Inflation. Smaller, yeah.
I wouldn't. Before we got off track, I totally forgot to even ask. So, what happened in that league? How did they resolve it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh shit! Yeah, I didn't. So they kicked around a couple ideas, but ultimately they just decided their commissioner decided Nick won. But and not to go too far down this fantasy thing, maybe I've already done that for you guys. But another interesting component of this, I pointed out to Nick. Do you guys both play fantasy? I know Mason does. You mentioned it. Do you, Josh?
I did
You
for a
have
long
before?
time, and I like kind of helping on now.
But in a lot of fantasy apps, they'll give you a projection of what your score is going to be. And I don't know exactly how they come out with that. Maybe it's just raw averages. But I told Nick, because T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow were projected to score like 67 or something combined, but that required against the Bills, who are just they're a good freaking team, one of the best teams in the league. But I told him, I was like, it kind of seems unreal. Like, how many times have those three guys this year combined to score that much?
That's a lot.
Like is that projection based on actually what realistically those three guys will score, or is it based on their three individual averages, which I think brings you to a different amount? I mean, you're talking about there's only so many balls to go around in one game. I would imagine that T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, on average, one of them has a really good game, but not both of them. So, like, if you look at these raw averages, I don't know if that paints the right picture when it comes to averages, because they're just, like I said, there's only so many balls in this team, and he looked into it, and they'd only done that twice this year. And it was towards the beginning of the year. I forget the teams, but it was against two shitty teams. So I was like, I think the odds are really even lower that he would have beat you than what that projection says. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like it's a statistical argument that's hard to explain, but.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring up that the averages or the projections were that high, because I've always said, like, fantasy projections are shit. They're almost never right.
They're like the weather.
Like they're never even close. But in my experience, they're always lower than, for the most part. Like, obviously, if a player busts, a player busts. But, like, when a player has an average to above average game, it's always a few points above the projection. So it's weird that it was that high, and at least in my experience, it tends to be
and against the Bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the weird part. I didn't even think of that until you mentioned that. So all those numbers sounded high. Then you're like, and that's still on top against the Bills. Like if you would have said that against like the Raiders, I'd be like, that's still a lot of fucking points.
Yeah.
They're Duke.
But they had kicked around. I think the ideas that they kicked around were Nick outright winning, which I think all in all was fair. I just told Nick, I was like, I don't think you should advocate for it, but I think that is how they should decide to do it. Or they split the pot, or they do something similar to what your league does anyway, Mason. They just go on to the next week for those 3 guys score.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I told him, I was like, I think when they're playing the Bills this week, that's kind of a raw deal for you, right? Because they played, was it the Ravens the following week? I can't remember,
sure.
but it was a lesser team than the Bills, as I mean, it's just, it puts you in a tough position where kind of in a way you're the one getting screwed by the thing that happened. But I told Nick, in my opinion, if I was to analogize it, like if I start Joe Burrow and, he sprains his ankle, right? That's like, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's like an act of God or something, right? Like I can't control that, and I get the raw deal of that. I can't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
I was like, it's unprecedented. You have to account for the fact you can't really account for it, but it is expected that there's a possibility that your player will get hurt or they get sick or they just can't play for some reason. And you have to eat that. Like you don't get, there's no insurance for that situation, right? And I told Nick, it's unprecedented, but this situation is really a lot similar to that, right? I mean, it's a guy who just, something bad happened. It took both teams out of the game and they're not going to play it. But really, I mean, it's kind of, it might not happen again for another 100 years or something, but it's possible. You know what I mean? Like
similar situation. What if a guy's on the way to the stadium and then his wife goes into labor and then he's like, oh, I'm going to the hospital and he doesn't play in the game. I feel like I've heard of things like that happening. Similar situation-ish. You know what I mean? But like the kickoff happens and he's locked in. You can't sub him out.
No, I agree. I don't know. I think if he had to split the pot, that'd have been a pretty raw deal in my opinion in that particular circumstance. Maybe I'm biased because it's my buddy, but
no, I agree. Especially when you're up. When you said he was up 70, that's yeah. I don't know how to.
Yeah,
I was on the other end of that.
I definitely wouldn't I wouldn't argue if your league treated it like, oh, it's just injury, 0 points for everyone because it just happens. Like you said, you go into it with the risk of just like, this is the real world, anything could happen, and my player can just not play 1 week. I'd be interested to know like if people got, if you bet on that game, if anyone was giving out like reasons.
Oh my god, I didn't even think of that. Fuck. I don't bet.
That's a good question.
Because talk about a bad beat.
Do you guys got like a Jamie on Joe Rogan that can look that up for us real quick?
You guys want to be a producer? Any listeners, please?
Hey, Gavin, you have experience, man.
I think you're much better at it than I am. Oh yeah. My wife might kill me if I get back into podcasting. It took up an exorbitant amount of my time when I was doing it.
Well, you have a gift for it a bit, I would say. This has been good. I want to switch real quick. I know it's kind of abrupt transition, I guess, but we got to get back to your.
I took us down a pretty far path. I realized that maybe we need to come back.
It's fun. We love it. So there's one thing I want to ask you. It's kind of random, but have you seen that meme, or not? I guess it's not meme. An old picture of in the 90s when there was a divorce settlement happening in a courtroom, and there was a pile of Beanie Babies on the ground, and they were sorting it.
No, I haven't. I have not.
I'll post it when I edit the video. I'll put it on here. But anyway, in the divorce, they had to separate Beanie Babies because it's back when they were worth whatever. So people thought it was a big deal. Whenever you're doing estate things, has there ever been like someone died and kids are wanting pieces of the estate and things like that, where something stupid like that ever came up where they wanted to split some dumb items or something like that?
Sure. I mean, people get petty when somebody dies. You get to see the worst side of people in the estate context, unfortunately, and it goes sour with people that you would think it would never go sour with, because I get to see both sides of it sometimes, and as I continue to practice in the same area of law, I'm sure I'll see it more as I get older. But you'll do somebody's estate planning, and then if they pass, typically you get to see the back end side of it too. I can think of maybe a few examples. One good one that comes to mind, there was like a 90s Honda ATV. And this thing hadn't been ran in years. And there was literally like a family of mice inside this thing, right? Like it had been sitting in a garage. There was a nest full of grass and leaves and all kinds of shit in the exhaust. Like I don't know what it would have taken to get this thing to run, but the thing looked like a junk heap to me. And this was an estate where this dude had farmland, he had tractors, he had a gun collection, there was things of value. But that's one thing the family got hung up on. But particularly the reason it led to them arguing about it, the dead dude wrote in his will that a particular son got all the farm equipment. So the argument was, because I didn't write that will, and that's super vague. I would prefer to always be more specific than that. If you want your son to have the Honda ATV, say, I want him to have the fucking Honda ATV in your will, right? But this dude said he gets all the farm equipment, livestock, and some shit. So the son thought that ATV fell under the definition of farm equipment, where my client didn't think so.
Yeah, I'm not
and
sure
really where I was, you don't agree that it didn't, or that you think it does?
I do not think that counts as farm equipment in my head.
And I would tend to agree, but kind of where I fell on it is like, do you really want to pay me to argue this shit? Because this thing ain't worth a nickel. Like, why are we arguing about this? It's just, I don't know. But sometimes people do things like that in this context to be more vindictive than anything. I mean, these siblings hadn't been close for years, and so it came. I don't think it was as much about the ATV as it was, fuck that sibling or whatever.
Doing that over like a dead relative, that's not
so classic.
Exactly. That's not really the time or place for that. But I mean,
Knives Out.
Siblings are petty,
Absolutely.
Have you seen Knives Out, Gavin?
I haven't yet. So I've never saw the first one.
Okay.
So we've been intending to watch that, but I've heard everybody I've heard talk about it says it's good.
It's good. It deals with like inheritance when someone dies, basically, and it's like family hating each other and kind of what you just described. And but it's good. Good story. So with the ATV, I guess I don't know if you can answer. If you can't, obviously don't. But did your client get the ATV?
No, I convinced my client to give the damn thing away.
So if there's like,
just take that so that you could take a bigger win later on. It's kind of my rationale, but it took some convincing.
You made a good point. It would cost more to pay you to get the rights to it than it was worth. So this doesn't have to be a lawyer answer from you, but just more just like a person who's exposed to this more than the average person. Is there a way, do you think, that other than just like don't be shit to your family members, like you could make it to where these types of disputes aren't as often or like as...
Yes, and I tell this to all my clients I do estate planning for. Fucking talk to people while you're alive, right? Like, people come to me and they want me to put everything into this all-encompassing document, and I do the best I can, but it's impossible, right? I mean, and a small aside before I talk more about that, I guess, if I write that, Jimmy gets the ATV, but then during your life, just because you're having a good day with your grandson, you tell little Timmy that he can have the ATV. Timmy's going to be pissed when you die, because what I said in your will is what's going to happen, right? Yeah. So what I tell clients when I write them, they ask me, what can I do to prevent Timmy and Jimmy from fighting? Talk to them. Yeah. Right? Sit your whole family down. Sit your kids down. Say, here's this will. Here's how things are going to happen. If you want Jimmy to have the ATV, say it right there in front of the whole family, if it's possible, right? And I understand that that's possibly an oversimplification, and sometimes these conversations are obviously really tough. But the biggest thing you can do is communicate with people. Let them know what your wishes were. And then what I should do on my end is make sure what's in black and white matches what your wishes are. But inadvertently or intentionally, if you tell them your wishes are different than what I write down, that's what leads to the most angst and frustration and volatility on the back end.
Do you think people aren't having enough of those conversations because it's difficult type of thing, or do you think it's just they don't think about it, like they genuinely don't, like, oh, I never thought to do that type of thing, or
Both.
Yeah.
We don't like to talk about death.
Yeah.
None of us do. I do it on a day in, day out basis. I honestly, if anything, sometimes I think I might be too desensitized to certain aspects of it, but it's inevitable. I mean, it's a cliche. It's going to happen to all of us. We've all got an expiration date. I mean, I've looked on me and I haven't found mine yet, but we've all got one. So, if it's something that somebody's concerned about, or if it's something that's more imminent, or someone has a chronic diagnosis or something, obviously there's certain things that just happen sometimes, and it's never going to be timely per se, or not very often anyway. But just go out of your way to not make it this untouchable subject if possible. It's easier said than done, but that's the best way I can think of to fix a lot of that.
I agree. I think I've kind of, I'm not going to go down there, but we've had similar recent talks in my family about not so much dying, but like in the realm-ish, whatever, from like health stuff. So something I've made me think while we had that, because we had a meeting with all my siblings, we all got together, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I think what can help maybe, and this sounds kind of weird, but if you almost had like a guide person there who is objective, and they don't have any, they don't have
completely
any,
biased.
As subjective.
They don't have any.
Completely advocates for Josh.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's someone here that's on my team that can get me everything I want.
No, okay.
You know my hourly rate, Josh. I'll be there for it.
This is gonna sound so bad now, family listeners. No one we know is gonna die. It wasn't that, but more of like taking care of someone as they get older in life type of a deal. That's kind of what we were discussing. So I think if somebody's there who doesn't have to weigh these sorts of things, they can just be like, here, from my angle, this makes the most sense logically. Things like that, who can kind of just ground everybody. That kind of helps. Almost like, it almost sounds like you're in like an AA meeting and you have one person, like whatever, I guess. I've never been to one, obviously, but that doesn't sound fun, but I feel like that could be something that could help people, because it's hard to like navigate that, I think, just the whole conversation.
It is. So I'm not asking for context about the particulars of your family, but when you say guide, like what do you mean? Guide you on what specifically?
Just more so have like keep the like a moderator in a debate, rather, like they just keep everybody on track with like, we need to decide like timeline of events, how this needs to go, and go step every along of the way when you're planning it, rather than just like, what do we get with this person dies? It's like, okay, we don't know if they're gonna die. Let's get to the point where we can talk about how we can help them in the meantime while they're still alive, type thing. So it kind of just keeps them more in order, I guess, if that even makes sense.
No, I'm with you, and frankly, I feel like I kind of fill that role for people sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's up to the person that has the shit as to what happens with it. We can all talk about it, and if they want other people to have input, other people can have input. But
yeah,
that kind of brings me to something I think about from time to time. I'd like to flip on you guys. We're so used to it that it just seems logical. But do you guys find it weird at all that a dead person gets to dictate what happens with property?
Now that you say that,
their property?
Now you're presuming a dead person still owns something, right? I mean, really, they don't. I mean, they're dead. They can't use it. I mean, George Washington's estate is not still in the name of George Washington. Property is benefited by the living. So why should we care what they think about this property?
Okay,
isn't that kind of what you like? That's what your job is, right? Like, it's It's making sure
I'm not
while-
advocating for
while
this.
they're living.
More philosophical, right?
Gavin's trying to make his job obsolete.
Yeah. It's like, guys, I really don't want to go to work tomorrow. This is crazy, right? This is insane.
Shades a lot
No.
of people.
No, but I mean, if I think it's fair to give them the right to decide while they're still living what happens to it when they're gone, you know?
But I get what you're saying, Gavin, but when they're gone, why is that enforced? Because what they said, like, they're not there.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
It's a more existential question, I think, than anything, right? Like, are we trying to honor them? Do we think that we have to carry out their wishes and they can still sort of see what's going on? Like, I think it's hard to separate. This is one of those weird things, like, it's almost, this is an exaggeration, but it's almost like if I was like, well, why do we really wear clothes? You know, like, we've done it so much, it's just a normal thing that we all do. And obviously if it's cold outside or something, it makes complete sense. But you know, in 100 degrees, or if we're all on the beach, you know, why do we wear clothes? I mean, it'd be super weird if someone didn't at this point, but if you really look at it, it's like, is it necessary per se? Like, I don't, it's just one of those, you know, I don't know what the answer to it is, but it is something I've thought about. You know, why do they get to decide? They're not here anymore.
Okay, so well, my immediate thought is, what happens if they don't? Like, how do you think it would play out?
Yeah, who gets to
Well, if they
decide
don't,
about that?
there's laws that decide. If you die with a will or, you know, a trust, it's called dying testate, meaning that you had a document that was legally recognized that can dictate what happens with these things when you're gone. If you die without any of those documents, it's called dying intestate. And Indiana and any other state is going to have some laws about what happens if you die intestate. So it's a common misconception that it all goes to the state. That's not true. You basically have to have no family for it to go to the state. But there's a statute. It just depends on the family that you have and the degrees of family and kinship that you have with certain people. But for the most part, it'll go to your spouse and your kids.
Makes sense. It's like next to kin type deal.
And then siblings and nieces and nephews and so on.
Is there times ever when like an estate, or I'm sorry, like a will can get overwritten or something? Like, even though they said they wanted to go to this person, whatever, is there times like where the court somehow decided like, no, that's not going to happen?
Sure. There, you know, I was going to say a litany of reasons. It's kind of a small list of reasons, very general reasons that a will can be overturned. I mean, if someone doesn't have capacity, if it wasn't properly executed for some reason, I mean, it's got to be witnessed in a very particular way, and there's certain formalities that go into executing a will. If someone unduly influenced you into signing it, you know, if you're an 85-year-old frail woman and little Jimmy, your son, takes care of you, but he's also maybe not necessarily physically, but mentally abusive, and he pulls you up to the lawyer's office and he's like, Mom, you better go in here and get this will signed, giving everything to me, and not include my sisters in it, or I'm just going to kick you to the curb. And then if Mom comes in and signs the will and someone finds out about that later, you know, it's kind of unduly influenced.
Have you ever had that happen or seen that happen?
I've been a part of cases that have tried to do that. Wow. It's a really hard thing to prove, though, because like even in my example, right, who's in the car with Mom and Jimmy? What evidence do I bring forward that proves that nobody else was in the car? It's possible, but it's a very hard thing to do in most situations.
Is there something about the process of writing wills that is not smooth or efficient now that you think could be going better than how it currently is? Like you said, there has to be witness and things. And if not, that works. I just didn't know.
I don't know that I have a general answer to that question, but if you'll allow me, I'll tell you another story that maybe gives you a better idea about how I feel about it. So I once had a client. It was an older man and an older woman, and they had both brought children into the relationship, right? They had adult kids by the time that they were together. And this dude, ironically enough, he tried to fight the IRS a couple times pro se, meaning he represented himself, about the definition of income, right? So this was a dude that didn't like to hire a lawyer, but he did like to go out of his way to pretend, you know, he knew the law. He had written up this will that was notarized. It was a pretty shittily written will as well. But in Indiana, to have a valid will, it's got to be witnessed by two objective witnesses, two people that are there contemporaneous with the signing at the same time you're signing it, that aren't going to take from the will in any way, aren't family members or anything like that, right? And if you don't have that, it's not valid. It's not a will, and your property's going to go via intestate succession, which I discussed before, right? We're going to look at that statute to see who your heirs are at this point. So this guy had this notarized document describing that he wanted his house to go to his wife, which was really pretty much the only thing he had. Intestate succession in this particular situation, if you have a subsequent, it's known under the law, this is where it gets somewhat complicated, but as a subsequent childless spouse, right? He had a spouse that was subsequent to the actual mother of his children that he was married to when he died. And in a situation like that, there's a particular divvying of property, if you will, between the kids and the surviving spouse, absent you saying something different in a will. Okay. So this lady came into my office and reasonably so thought, hey, my husband died. I just need to get the house in my name now. He had this will and I'm looking at it. And, I had to break this lady's heart and tell her this will isn't valid. Right. Now, I imagine you guys would, and I can definitely say I would as well, if my father had written a document that was notarized, for God's sakes, saying that he wanted his wife to have his house. I would honor that. I don't care what the law says. I would gift it over to her or do whatever I had to do to make sure my father's wishes were honored, which is really the whole point of a will anyway. We're talking about a legal technicality here, right? So I tried to advocate for this lady. I couldn't really pressure the kids to do that, but I did go out of my way to emphasize the fact that their father had a document that was notarized, meaning someone acknowledged that this was definitely him that signed it and that his wish was she had it. Well, the kids decided they wanted their share. And I think we can all agree that that's a pretty shitty outcome, right? So, how do you fix that? I don't know. Maybe there should be a few more exceptions to the regular formalities of wills than there usually is. But I hated that for her. And I think that is a shitty outcome. So, I don't know. But you also have to tailor a fine line. You don't want it to be so easy to execute a will that it's really easy to forge either. So, I don't know.
It's like you were saying earlier, how, it's kind of worthy of all the hoops that you have to jump through. Unfortunately, just because that's kind of the way it has to be done to make sure
and balances
that everything's good. But yeah, it's tough. I don't know. Was it hard, like when you were in law school? Was it hard for you to learn all these technicalities and kind of wrap your head around everything that goes into these things?
Yes, at least for me it was. Yeah, it gets pretty darn complicated. Sometimes it seems like it's overly complicated in a very unnecessary way. But yeah, and frankly, I think you would be surprised how little applicable law you actually learn in law school. I mean, you spend most of your law school career learning about general principles of law, and then when you go to practice, even for example, my wills and trust class, right? A lot of it was about general principles of wills and trusts, where a lot of what we're discussing or have discussed thus far, or that I've alluded to, is Indiana specific. And even though I went to a law school that's located in Indianapolis, they still teach things in a pretty general way. And I think the rationale is, they're usually trying to get a lot of out-of-staters to come in to diversify the student population. I don't know. I know I could have got a much lower tuition by going out of state. I guess probably for that exact reason. They're trying to encourage out-of-staters to come, yes. But I wanted to stay close to my now wife at the time, and I just wanted to stay close to family, and I did have a job going through law school at the firm that I do work at now, so just all those things led me to stay. But nonetheless, I've learned a lot more in practice and hands-on legal practice than in law school, I would say. I mean, certainly I think it's hard to, at some point, I think those general principles are important, but It's just like college, man. There's a bunch of excess credits and bullshit stuff you got to jump through to get the degree that probably at the end of the day isn't really applicable to what you're doing.
So would you change that about just law school in general, or do you think it kind of works out for the best that it's a lot of just general stuff?
I would cut out some of it for sure. I mean, I think that you got to know those principles. I mean, you got to know like the Constitution, for instance, to a degree at least. I mean, I don't think you're going to find many lawyers that can recite the Constitution to you, but you better darn well know, generally the articles and the Bill of Rights, or at least most of the important ones. So, and that's just an example. I mean, con law is one facet of all this, but knowing property law, knowing some criminal law. There's so much overlap quite often in situations that clients have. You got to know some of it generally, but also just, again, I think it might even be worse in undergrad, really. There's just certain things they force you to go through that I don't think is too relevant, really.
Extra money they get by taking those classes. That's how I always viewed it.
Yep. They have money.
Okay, I have a question for you, Gavin. This is shifting subjects a little bit, but that seems to be that there's a lot more influx of lawmakers who don't even understand basic laws. Do you feel that there should be more requirement for people to get into the practice of creating laws, similar, because you have to go to school for a long time to practice it, but then I feel like people can go in and create laws and they don't have to do nearly as much background in it as you do.
God, it's such a complicated issue because lawmakers are voted on, right? So really the root of it is in the incompetency of the voters. So if you want to change the law and have certain requirements, who decides on those requirements? Because you've got the circular issue where it can't be the people you're voting on if you're not happy with them, right? So
True.
I think that, and then you get into a real bad area if you're starting to talk about something totally non-democratic. So, honestly, this might sound stupid and sort of a cop-out to your question, but I think all of it's rooted in probably just better education.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think that's the level you attack it at. You want to have a more educated voter base, and hopefully that leads to more educated lawmakers.
Smarter people typically make smarter decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're all too worried about freaking TikTok and bullshit nowadays. I don't think anybody pays attention to that stuff, and I'm guilty of it as well. I don't want to sound all high and mighty here. I think we all are to a degree, but I think the solution to the problem is probably a little bit deeper than some sort of body that puts limits on who qualifies to be a lawmaker.
Makes sense. That's a good answer. I wanted to say one thing. You talked about TikTok. Have you seen it got brought up again that they're proposing banning that in the states, like Congress or whatever?
I did not, but I wonder if it's not a good idea.
It's funny you bring that up. My sister goes to Auburn, and they have it banned on campus, so you can't access TikTok on their Wi-Fi.
That's crazy. So they must not use that to market,
I guess,
like the
not.
university.
Yeah. I mean, the students obviously still do. They'll use their data, or they'll get like VPN or some shit. But yeah, it's just interesting.
Wow.
They did that, when it's not like law or anything like that. They just decided like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen here.
I know government employees aren't supposed to have it now. Like, it's banned for them on their work phones and work devices, whatever. So that's the first time I've heard a non-government job to do that.
It's funny too, because I was scrolling through my TikTok the other day, and one of the North Carolina politicians came up on the feed and was like talking about some shit that happened, I don't know, in the House or some shit the other day. He was like, yeah, this is super unethical. I'm like, oh, okay, so they've got TikToks now. They're fucking they're making TikToks now. This is the direction this is going. All right.
Oh boy. The numbers on it are insane though.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to reach a lot of people, that's like the number one thing to do right now.
Yeah, follow us on TikTok, guys.
True.
It's just it's such a even getting into the position of being a legislator or in any sort of political position, it's just such a popularity contest. Um, and people eat that shit up. And again, I think we're all guilty of it from time to time, and I think that's probably been true to an extent forever. But I think probably longer ago it was about newspapers and word of mouth and stuff that back then I guess political people were trying to play that kind of thing to get into certain positions, but nowadays to have a TikTok go viral and get 1 million views, that's like the pinnacle, and it's like what is that really worth? I just think, yeah, we're kind of straying away from maybe human nature to a degree, for lack of a better way of describing it. I don't know, but I think that it just all mixes in a very bad way, at least right now.
No, you're right, man. I totally agree on that. It's for sure that there's enough data now that social media has been out for long enough, and a lot of media outlets and people try to intertwine smartphones and social media, where they say smartphones are making a generation depressed. It's not smartphones, it's social media. They've boiled it down to that fact. And like the Atlantic had a really good article about it one time, and it was kind of polarizing to some people because they said smartphones are killing a generation, but somebody went in and like broke it down and like, no, this is, and like science-based showed that it was social media. So you're totally right. There is factual evidence now that it is having adverse effects. And that's not even dealing with their involvement in politics anymore. You know what I mean? How they're steering things that we never thought they would.
Man, I think it depends on how you broadly define social media too. So I'll use myself as a personal example. And like, what has it been? It's been a little over a year now. Like around November, December of 21, I decided to delete all my social media, and it was really tough for a few months. And I struggled to figure out how to fill that void, but I'm to a point I've never re-downloaded it. I never went back to it. Somewhat recently, I re-downloaded Facebook for the sole purpose of using Facebook Marketplace. But what I will say about that, I still spend a lot of time on my phone, and I still absorb a lot of garbage on my phone. Most of the time on my phone I spend now is in Apple News or on YouTube, or I like to play video games, so I get on Twitch as well. And that none of that is really productive to my life. I mean, I think all that information, even, I think even news nowadays, you look at a lot of news articles are just bullshit. And I've found that, frankly, I try to force myself to read some academic shit or something once in a while, but I do read a lot of garbage too. So, it might be a little better, especially than certain kinds of social media, but I do think that the time I spend on my phone is still a huge time suck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the void is still filled by something on my smartphone that probably isn't productive to my day-to-day life.
Yeah, no, I think it's like kind of, at least for me, it's like an attention span thing. It's like when I'm just kind of like my mind's everywhere, and I'm at work or whatever, I'm bored. I always just like not even do anything. I'll just like look down at my phone and then look back up just because it's like a momentary break in whatever I'm doing. But yeah, it's just kind of addicting to a certain degree.
No, it's a real thing.
Sure.
I was trying to stay. I get on Reddit way too much. Just touch on what you said, Mason. And I set on Apple, you can set like restrictions on apps, so it would stop the app after like a half hour total time during the day, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a time and I would still be like, I'll just override it for 5 minutes. It ended up being an hour, whatever. So then I got to the point I like removed it from my home screen or something along those lines. And I would just like instinctively open my phone without even thinking and hit the spot where the app was and just open that. And it wasn't that the app wasn't there anymore. And I'm like, what am I doing? Because I've made myself stay off for like a week. And
yeah,
my brother did the same thing once we talked about it. It's like half of it I feel like is almost just muscle memory. Like you don't even want to do it. It just satisfies like not a subconscious effort you have that you don't realize. So I think it's like a habit breaking thing. So what do they say? It's like 2 weeks to make a habit, but it only takes whatever to break one. So it's almost like you're making a habit of not getting on. So you have to do it for like a while. And like you say, Gavin, you haven't even thought about downloading them again, really.
Yeah, I think the tough spot is filling the void, right? I mean, you could say get rid of social media, but you've got to put something else there. Like, it's like people that, I fortunate enough, I was never addicted to cigarettes, but I know a lot of people have tried to get off it. I think it's something you do while you drive. It's something you do on your 15-minute break at work. It's
Yeah.
how do you fill that void? I think is one of the hardest parts of breaking a habit like that. And I think that's a lot more similar to social media and the time we spend on our phone than a lot of us would like to admit. I mean, it is super addictive, and I think it's way more addictive than most people think it is. But what do you do with that time? That's a question that you have to answer to be successful in eliminating it.
You said something too I wanted to touch on, how you said you think you could be doing something more productive with your time. And that's also something I deal with a lot is I think we feel we need to be productive all the time, and that's not normal. Like how much of that is natural or how much is that like nature versus nurture? How much is that because we grew up in a very workaholic society in America where we feel like, oh, I'm like spending time playing a video game. I should be like trying to make money right now, constantly being like, we're just producers and consumers and that's it. And there's no life to live in the spaces in between. I totally get that sentiment because I'll be doing something. I'm like, man, I should be doing some more productive. But where do you like, where would you put the line where it's like, okay, I've done enough. It's okay for me to have leisure time or something like that. Like, how do you, I guess, cope with that, or what do you think?
Well, I guess I would disagree. I think to what you said somewhat, just because I think, and not to go try to play evolutionary biologist, right? But I think that if you were a hunter gatherer, other than maybe some time at night with your family or something, you probably were doing some shit constantly. So I think there's probably a reason we feel that way. And I also don't know, I have plenty of leisure time. And certainly there are times maybe I feel
Lazy bitch.
you call me red-handed, fuckers. But anyway, but I also don't know that if maybe feeling a little bit guilty about it sometimes is a bad thing, right? Like, I don't know that having this idea that I've earned some leisure time is something that you should really get used to either. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying you can't have leisure time, but also you're not entitled to it. Like in a worst case scenario, you might have to be doing some shit almost all the time.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I guess it just comes down to like, I don't know, weighing your options. It's like, can I actually afford leisure time right now? Yeah. Should I? Maybe not, but if you can, you can, I guess,
Opportunity cost, right?
Yeah.
What are you foregoing by doing this thing?
So I guess to solve the problem I kind of brought up by that would be like screen time stuff, like just limit things, everything within reason, I guess.
All things in moderation, right?
Like, for me, I'm very like goal oriented. So like when I wake up in the morning, it's not the first thing I think about, but I kind of want to get a good idea of like what I want to get done today, and just having that in your head every day, just kind of like, okay, I want to get this, and this done. And then after that I can chill. But, something, so it's not just like moment by moment, like, oh, should I do this right now? It's like, no, I already decided these are all the things I'm going to do today.
I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Goal oriented. Good job, Mason.
If I didn't do that, man, I would get nothing done. Cause you leave me with a little bit of time where I don't know what to do. And I'll hop on video games. I'll watch TV. I'll scroll through my TikTok. It's not good.
I'm with you. Or we waste time, make podcasts like this, waste Gavin's time, get him on here.
This shit's fun, man.
Fun.
I've got, a couple hours on a Thursday night to talk to you fellas. I've had a lot of fun tonight. But no, I think that's a good way of doing it, Mason. Actually, that's one of the, I think I'm similar in a lot of respects. And one of the things I hate the most about my job is I typically don't get to start something and finish it on the same day. I have to like constantly juggle a bunch of things. That's like one of the things that I still don't like about it, but it was one of the hardest transitions into doing what I do. I hate that. I hate that I got a client that comes in and, maybe they need a guardianship, and then you got to draft the paperwork, and then you got to file it. Maybe there's some phone calls and conversations along the way, and then you got to have a hearing, and maybe you got to have another hearing.
Wow.
The resolution could be months and months away, sometimes longer.
Oh,
so
man.
it's just,
You don't get that like boost of serotonin or whatever it is when you like complete a task. You don't get that until
Right.
way later.
You just think about the next step. So you got to try to take some sort of gratification in the smaller steps of the thing, because it could take a while to finish it. But it is pretty cool when you finally finish some things like that sometimes. But anyway, just I'm envious of people sometimes who are in certain kinds of jobs where like you get an instant resolution. If a plumber goes to fix a toilet and they unclog it, or there was a leak in the pipe and they fix it, like there it is.
Yeah.
That's a good point. It's like immediate rewarding sensation you get from seeing the fruits of your labor.
Yeah.
This was good, man. Thanks for spending time with us, talking about all the things.
Hey, no problem, man. It's been fun talking with you boys. Mason, it was nice virtually meeting you here, and
Yeah, of course. Check out you.
if you guys ever have some dead space in your schedule, I'd be happy to do it again.
We'd love to have you back,
Absolutely,
man. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening. New episodes recorded every Monday, so be sure to go listen and rate the podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you want to watch the video episode, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Critical Solutions. Visit our website at www.criticalsolutions.com and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. The links to all our socials are in the episode description. All right, Josh, see you next week.
See you, man. Take it easy.